Comics were looking at the popularity of the Adventures of Captain Marvel movie serial. They were looking at the popularity of the Whiz Comics and Captain Marvel Adventures, and they said, you know, we got to do something about this. They had already sued out of existence Wonder Man, who was actually a deliberate copy of Superman. They had already threatened Fawcett with enough lawsuit for them to stop publishing Master Man in Master Comics, who was actually a spoof. In fact, on the cover of his first comic, he was copping a feel of the girl he was rescuing. But finally, they just filed a lawsuit against Republic Pictures and against Fawcett, saying, Captain Marvel is too much like Superman, it's violation of copyright, stop it, pay us. And the court case got delayed till like 1947. It started in 1941. In the meantime, Superman developed the ability to fly before, no, correct that, reverse it. Captain Marvel developed the ability to fly before Superman. But comic books were in such their infancy that a great degree of the mainstream couldn't tell the difference between one superhero in a cape and another superhero in a cape, including the Judge. But Fawcett Comics noticed that in the Superman newspaper strip, they'd forgotten to put the copyright notice in. It said, abandonment. The first judge said, accepted the abandonment. DC appealed. Judge Learned Hand said, it was not intentional abandonment, and in these silly pictures, nobody cares about one thing or another. This one is too much like that one. DC is right. Send it back to the lower court, figure out what the damage is. And the damage was going to be assessed by saying, see this picture of Captain Marvel? That's a direct rip-off of this picture of Superman. So that's one. Then the Fawcett people would come back and say, see this picture of Superman? That's a direct picture of this picture of Captain Marvel that came first. Back at you. So they had interns and staffers and lawyers just combing through pages and pages of that, and then going back to Tarzan comics and Popeye comics, saying that Captain Marvel may have been a copy of that Superman, but that Superman was a copy of that Tarzan. And by this time, who's heard of Dr. Wortham? All right. Dr. Frederick Wortham, who is by all accounts except for this issue, a good, smart, and sensitive child psychologist. He was one of the guys who helped fight the segregation in public schools, right? He loved children. He cared about children. He was concerned about the great increase in juvenile delinquency in the early 50s. He talked to a bunch of juvenile delinquents. He asked them, do you read comic books? Every kid read comic books, including every juvenile delinquent. He did not set up a randomized control group. So therefore, when he wrote this book called Seduction of the Innocent, he made it look like that if comic books were banned tomorrow, juvenile delinquency would be over the next day. Well, before he actually published this book, there was a lot of great public sentiment against comic books. In World War II, superheroes had fought against the Axis. It was easy to fight against the Axis. You could dehumanize the enemy all you want because it was a total war. But after World War II, superheroes didn't have anybody to fight anymore. So other comics of other genres, war, western, crime, horror, romance, teen, funny animals started dominating the comic book industry. In fact, there are only 3 superheroes that have been in publication constantly since the 1930s and 40s, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. And comic book sales in general was slipping by the end of the 40s, by the early 50s, and here was Fawcett Comics. Remember Fawcett Comics and the lawsuit?
Oh, yeah.
They were paying these staffers to look up all these old comics. The sales were slipping, and they said, you know, fuck it, you won. Here. And they settled out of court, gave DC Comics $400,000 and agreed not to publish any more Captain Marvel comics and just cut the whole line of comics. Sold off a few of their characters to Charlton. Poppy the Marvel Bunny was renamed Happy the Magic Bunny and redrawn. They whited out the lightning bolt on his chest. And the only other comic book that Fawcett has published since then was Dennis the Menace, which actually lasted for about 20 years. And that was the end of Captain Marvel, or so we thought.